welcome everybody. This is Jennifer Skog with MJ Lifestyle, and I have my co-pilot with me today, Betsy Kabacher. She has written several articles for us, does a ton of different things. She's just amazing, super, super intelligent, and I'm stoked to have her on our team. So let's just get on with our little interview.
That's Dr. Rachel, you were recently quoted in Marijuana Moment saying that cannabis continues to be, to this day, a tool weaponized against communities of color. It's really, in my opinion, paradoxical that we are now using the economy of cannabis to fund the very institution that continues to terrorize communities of color. What do you feel like needs to, what are the changes that need to happen so that the future looks different?
Our regulations need to change. Our tax codes with respect to how we use cannabis tax revenue needs to change. I mean, what we've seen, which is the funding of police bureaus, law enforcement agencies through cannabis tax revenue should have never happened, period. In states that have legalized medical use or adult use, we've actually seen an increase in the rate of arrests in community of color. There's been an overall decrease in arrests, but that relative rate between non-people of color and people of color has increased in favor of increasing arrest rates for people of color. We're not moving the needle, folks. Like, law enforcement is still over-policing our communities and over-enforcing marijuana laws, right? There's still marijuana laws that exist in legal states because there are certain possession limits that are still illegal.
Or consumption, open consumption.
Open consumption, yes, simple open consumption. And so we know this, we have the data and the statistics that demonstrate that this is still happening even in legal states. So for these police bureaus, law enforcement agencies to continue to receive funds from the economy of a plant that is still being criminalized, right? For which we're still arresting people of color is, I mean, it's insane. It's abhorrent. It is wholly unethical. It is cruel. I don't know how many more negative words I need to apply to that statement to help people understand that it's hypocritical and it's ruthless. It needs to stop, period. It just does. Like, I don't know what else to say about it. It's disgusting.
Also, the business aspect of it, how, people of color have had such high barriers to getting into the business, the cannabis space, period. And I think that is a problem as well that needs to be addressed. The financial barriers to get in has been horrendous for people of color, when we know that the economy, the financial reward from this cannabis space can be hugely beneficial to the community. And
what's interesting is that the legacy market, we call the black market legacy market. We should get away from that term, black market. But the legacy market, or the heritage market, some people call it, has been where a lot of today's operators came from. But white legacy, market operators have had an easier time transitioning into the legal market than our legacy operators of color, because of the over-policing and the over-enforcement and the higher, arrest rates and conviction rates of people of color, right? The system is racist inherently, and we need to atone for that in this industry, right? This is, I would say this exists in other industries as well, but this industry specifically, we have a lot of information about already to ensure that we are righting the wrongs of the war on drugs, and we're not doing that. And I think the prioritization has to happen at the level of the government, right? Cannabis tax revenue should first serve research and equity. And it doesn't matter in what order, in my opinion, right? Cannabis is medicine. We need to be doing the research. But cannabis also needs to be used as a tool to provide some restorative justice and community restoration as a whole to these communities that have been disrupted in such a way. Because it's not just about creating opportunities for economic involvement and economic inclusion in the cannabis industry for people of color. The prohibition of cannabis and the war on drugs disrupted communities. right? If a young person of color wants to grow up and be an astronaut, they need to have the resources within their ecosystem to help them achieve that. They might not want to go into the cannabis industry, and they shouldn't have to, but the downstream effects of cannabis prohibition has made it such that young people of color have a hard time self-actualizing and accessing resources so that they can realize their dreams too. So we have to account for that. The economy of cannabis should absolutely be paying for restitution, right? We talk about reparations a lot in this country, and there used to be an argument that we don't have the money to put towards reparations, which was a lie. But now we have a brand new, crop of cash that popped up literally overnight from $0 to billions that we can direct into community restoration projects. I mean, from expungements, right, the social justice aspect of correction, to community restoration revitalization projects. We can do it all. There is enough money to get that done, but it has to be prioritized at the level of government through legislation and through our regulations. And right now, when cannabis is legalized and governments are contemplating this new crop of cash, right, everybody's coming to the table asking for some of it. Everybody. Agencies, departments, school districts, everybody's coming because they have budgets they need to pay for too, including law enforcement. So including them. And not everybody should get to receive that. So again, those conversations need to be had. They need to bring the right people in to inform them on how to use that cannabis tax money appropriately. And it needs to begin with medical research and with total equity for people of color. Yeah.
I feel like leaving the whole conversation to the government is leaving out so much opportunity for businesses to also take ownership of making sure those changes happen. What can these individual businesses do to align and support and really nurture communities of color and also individual entrepreneurs who are interested in getting into cannabis? Because I think, like, when you look at the equity programs that are being built, they're being built within an industry that is not equitable.
Correct.
And so for anyone, except if you're an MSO, right, and you have the lobbyists to go and talk to policymakers, but how do we bring it back down to, like, this is an individual issue that anyone in the cannabis industry really needs to take ownership of?
Yeah, I think the opportunities are endless. And I think every worker, every licensee, every operator needs to take inventory of their capability, right, and their ability. It might mean intentionally, hiring more people of color. Take a look at your personnel, especially take a look at it within the context of the neighborhood you might be serving. Try to mirror that if it's out of balance. There are plenty of people of color who have products that need shelf space. Increase the percentage of shelf space that you're dedicating to operators of color. Maybe you're big enough that you can bring in some interns, of color, some young people to learn the craft and pay them for it, right? Because they're going to be doing work so that they can learn a thing or few and self-actualize within that context, right? They might want to become a retail operator, or maybe through that exposure, they want to become a cultivator, or not even a plant touching, a business owner at all. But the whole idea is that we have to increase visibility and opportunity in this industry for people of color. That's just a start. I'm very vocal about my belief that everybody who stands to make a profit off of this plant directly or indirectly has to first tithe to health equity. Unapologetic about that, much like you might tithe to church. So yeah, that's a 10% right off the top that goes back into health equity, whatever that looks like, but it is a commitment. And I say the same at the state level. Right? It's not just about the state and cities doing the right things with cannabis tax revenue. It's about each operator in the cannabis industry understanding that they have a debt to pay too. These aren't handouts, right? This plant was weaponized and disrupted communities, making it harder for people from those communities to do anything, not just get a job in the cannabis industry. So, until that is rectified, this money is de facto blood money. It is. That sounds extreme, but that's literally what it is. And we all have a part to play, including operators of color. Just because you're of color doesn't give you a pass. You have to be participant now, right? In using that money, those profits, to serve achieving equity for all people too, right? So it doesn't end with white operators. It doesn't begin in all operators. Yeah.
Sorry, Rach. I think it's a matter too of like, put your money where your mouth is, right? It's not enough to post a black box on social media. It's not enough to like repost one of Dr. Rachel's awesome IG posts, right? Like, if you're going to recognize that this stuff matters insofar as you want to show people that you believe it matters, put your money where your mouth is, right? Like, we hold ourselves accountable for a lot of other standards in business. Like, if you're not meeting your sales projections or you're not delivering on something else you were supposed to deliver on, you get fired. Like, why has it been for like over a decade that all these businesses are like, oh, we're really trying to hit this diversity quota? Why haven't you hit it? If the person who's responsible for hitting that quota hasn't done it, why do they still have a job? They haven't done their job. So, whether it's we're trying to hit this quota or we have to give this amount of money or whatever it is, like, put your mark in the sand and deliver on it. And, a lot of us are doing work now to hold these companies accountable. I don't know if you've seen any of these lists, but there are lists in the tech industry, there are lists in the cannabis industry of here's what these businesses are doing, here's what they've said they're going to do. We're going to check up on you in a few months to see how you're progressing towards those stated goals, because the time is now to be holding each other accountable.
Absolutely.
I want to add that I think the language needs to change. Diversity and inclusion, and Dr. Rachel and Dr. Jesse know how I feel about that. But diversity and inclusion are terms that I absolutely cringe at, and I'm beginning to cringe at the term social equity as well. Because they're becoming band-aids for we've done our part, now let us get back to business as usual. And we as people of color need not to accept those terms either. What we should be talking about is equity, period, across the board. I don't want the social equity. I don't want to be included. I don't want you to diversify. That puts me in a role of being, subject to other people and their needs and what they think is fair and equitable. I want equality. I want to travel that pathway that has no potholes, just like they do. And so, not that we or against that, but it just hasn't served people of color well, those terms. They're still trying to sort of make us subject to their policies and their feel good about what they're doing.
Those terms have been misused, right? Diversity just speaks to the variety that's present in any given situation or place. Inclusion means that all of those people of all those varieties are included in the conversation. And those are all important and they're necessary, but they don't mean equity, right? That doesn't mean that at the end of the day, all of those varieties of people who have been participant in the conversation get paid the same or are treated the same. So you actually have to address all three, but it's not going to be impactful unless you ensure that equity is occurring as well. So I think there is a space for all those terms. I agree with my mom that we got to get rid of this term social equity. It's been exploited. Social equity programs have been wholly exploited. It's become tokenized. It's very denigrating now. We are othering equity applicants as just simply calling them equity applicants, right? There's general applicants and there's
like it's charity.
There's people and then there's Black people, right? Who are people? People are synonymous with white. Like, so we have to get rid of that entirely. And I do want to say one more thing about the tithe, that everybody owes something. Capital isn't always economic. It's not always financial. There are other ways that organizations who might just be breaking even, right? And we're telling them that 10% of that needs to go towards an equity cause. Well, you have a voice, you have a platform, you have marketing dollars, right? How are you wielding your other assets in the name of achieving equity. And, you know, my call to action is, yes, act, but make sure it's impactful and measurable, and measure it. Because if you don't hold yourself accountable, somebody else will. And at the end of the day, we're operating in a time where transparency is everything. It is not enough to just give philanthropically and be quiet about it right now. Like, I understand that, it's very biblical. Like, you don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. You don't boast about giving back, etc. But right now, we need to hold everybody accountable. We need to know what you're doing, how you're doing it, and how you're measuring it, so that we know you can hold yourself accountable, and so that we can hold yourself accountable too. Because this is a big lift right now. We have to change a whole lot of minds. We have to change a whole lot of behaviors. And if we're not demonstrating change to the tune of being transparent about it, and actually measuring the impact of that change, we're not going to get very far. Like, this is going to be a fly-by-night, you know, protest and demonstration by and large. That's not going to get us anywhere. And our government and our society has a nasty habit of sweeping things under the rug when it gets too uncomfortable, and when the next headline pops up and can, you know, distract us, or sporting event comes along that can distract us from the bigger picture. And we can't afford it this time around. And I think the cannabis industry is young enough, it's nascent enough for us to get it right. We have the opportunity right now for a do-over. Not every state has legalized, and the states that have legalized, some of them have already started talking about restructuring. Washington and Colorado are two of them that have gone on record and saying, okay, we need to start over because what we've created isn't working.
Absolutely. I heard you mention in that this idea of health equity. Can you speak more to what that means, and how can cannabis play a role in addressing the minority health gap?
Yeah, this is another attempt that I hope is sticky to change the way we define health. You know, when somebody comes into our clinic with a diagnosis, whether it's high blood pressure or diabetes or cancer, they're just not a diagnosis, and we're not just treating that specific disease process. They're coming to us as the sum total of their lifetime experience and exposure. You know, so, you know, from a functional medicine perspective, which is the endocannabinologist's perspective, we have to take account of their entire lifestyle, what they're eating, who they're around, how they're thinking, what they're wearing, where they're breathing, what's the state of their home environment, do they have access to you know, clean, green spaces they can kick their shoes off in and ground in. What are their economic resources, right? What sorts of access to resources do they have? Are we sending you back into a food desert after we just counseled you on choosing natural whole foods, and when you go home you can't find any? As I mentioned earlier, medical care happens in the clinic, but healthcare happens in life. And so, you know, for us, health is the sum of four major determinants, and those four major determinants can be broken down further. But those four determinants of health, and mind you, I didn't say social determinants of health, because social is one of those. So the four major determinants of health are our human determinants, our environmental determinants, our economic determinants, and our social determinants. And in this definition, all social means is the infrastructure, the social network through which we all flow from our day to day, right? The facilitation of access to resources, the facilitation of participation, maybe in the civic process, for example, the facilitation of cooperation and collaboration between people and those opportunities. That's social, that's a framework. Environmental determinants are things like clean air and water and soil and natural whole foods and your literal living environment. Is there mold, right? Do you have a bed to sleep on? Human determinants really speak to an individual, and that is an individual's skill set, education, personal capability, ability, adaptability, and the literal physical, mental, and spiritual fitness of that person. And then lastly is the economic determinants, right? Do you have an income? Are you able to keep savings? Do you have access to capital? Do you have agency over how that money is used? Like, do you have a choice? And so those are the determinants of health. All of those things have to be taken into account when we're trying to help dissect and treat diabetes, because when you leave my office, you're going back into an ecosystem that is the sum total of all of those factors. And so when we talk about health equity now, we're talking about the intentionality of ensuring that there's balance in an individual's life across all of those 4 buckets. And that might mean we have to invest more into one bucket than the other, but the goal is to make sure that it is balanced for every individual in an equitable way. That is health equity. And so, that's why I'm also being very intentional about differentiating health from medicine, right? Medical care from health care. We don't provide health care in the conventional medical system. We provide medical care. Health care cannot happen out of the medical system because healthcare requires the government to get on its job. It requires corporations to get on its job. It requires our environmentalists to get on their job. It requires us to collaborate in creating an ecosystem that helps each and every one of us thrive so that we can be our healthiest selves. So health is the big picture. Social equity is just a little component of the bigger picture. Because again, and that's why we're educating healthcare professionals, because we are the hub. It's like we're the hub of lifestyle. People come to us when they don't feel well, but they don't feel well because of everything else that is happening out there for them. And so, in my opinion, health equity is synonymous with total equity or just equity in general. Like when we say equity, we mean it in the broadest sense of the word. So you can interchange health, total, or just equity and mean the same thing. But that's what we're trying to achieve, right? The war on drugs caused disruption to these communities, to their ecosystems. So the goal is to leverage cannabis to create health equity for these communities. And when we do that for these communities, we're gonna do it for all people, right? Black and brown communities have been disinvested in for so long that yes, we have to be super intentional about investing in them, well, not investing in others as much while we try to, course correct and level up a little bit. And we all have to be willing to give a little. And I put that in quotations because what are we really giving up, right? What are the things that those that have that are giving up, right? What are the things that those that have are giving up such that other people can have it too? Not much. It's mostly an ideology. It's mostly an irrational fear. There is enough to go around, right? We have to stop disinvesting in people so that we can invest in them at the same rate we're investing in everybody else. So it is about sharing. It's not about losing. And if anything, we'll all benefit more greatly by applying innovations and good programs, high quality programs and services to these communities to course correct what has happened. We'll all benefit from that. So I don't know what the pushback is. But the other thing I wanted to add, what operators can do in cannabis is support good legislation. Like we need our trade associations, our companies to band together and support the right kind of policies that put equity front and center. That's why we got to get rid of social equity. Social equity, by and large, is an afterthought when it comes to creating policies and enforcing regulations. It's like an add-on. It's like affirmative action. It's not an add-on. Like it has to be core to the mission of legalization, or else it's not going to happen. If it's always an afterthought, if it's always a line item, if it's always a quota, we're never going to move that needle. So if you don't have money, you do have a voice. And you can support good legislation. You can show up, at Capitol Hill, at the state building. You can show up and testify in front of Congress, right, in favor of bills that put equity and medical research of cannabis front and center.
And that's what's so amazing about cannabis too, is you can actually get involved as any citizen can show up and be heard, and they have to be heard. The legislators have to listen to them. I feel like your work probably with the Minority Cannabis Business Association really lends itself to ensuring that we're aware of what the agenda is and what our asks are. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the initiatives you're working on there and how other people can get involved?
Yeah, so MCBA, the Minority Cannabis Business Association, is the first business league of color in cannabis. And it is a network of, Black, brown, other people of color owned enterprises. But the bulk of MCBA's work is policy reform. And what we're working on this summer is a reprisal of our model bill that we created 3 years ago. And this was originally a very adult focused model state bill, and several states have adopted language around social equity provisions that were included in that. But at the time that this was constructed 3 years ago, I mean, my team heard from me, like, there's nothing about medicine or research in this. Like, we've missed the mark, in my opinion, by not including it. So this time around, we're including it, and we're redefining equity because we really do need some consensus on what that means. And we're including a lot of medical and scientific directives in it. So this is going to be an omnibus bill, pie in the sky. Like, this is what it should look like, sort of product.
At the standard.
Yep. And, simultaneously in Oregon with Oregon Cannabis Commission, we're going through the same process. Our commission is advisory in nature, but one of the things that we're doing is creating a model bill for the state of Oregon, because adult use is already here. Medical is already here. So what do we need to do now to course correct it? Because we're not starting from a clean slate. And the whole goal is to have some consistency. Right, so the state model bill that MCBA is constructing is meant to be applied to all states, and certainly all states have the opportunity to adapt it to their individual needs, and should. But in lieu of federal legalization, it is time for these legal states to operate similarly to one another. Right, that's what equity is all about. A patient in Massachusetts, for example, should not be treated differently than a patient in Oregon. There needs to be some standardization to ensure patient equity for those patients that reside in different states. But I think, my experience in MCBA, my experience as a clinician in this industry, and, just being of color has shaped how I perceive and how I advise within the cannabis industry. And, our family, along with some other really exceptional people in Oregon, have founded a new organization called the Cannabis Health Equity Movement. It's actually the CHEM Coalition, Cannabis Health Equity Movement, abbreviated into CHEM, which is also, a nod, an homage of our scientific leaders like Meshulam, who identified CBD, THC, and CBG, the chemistry, right, of cannabis, has really catapulted us to where we are today. So that name means, right, we believe that cannabis should be used to achieve health equity, but also we're honoring the fact that the science and the chemistry of cannabis has brought us to where we are today. And, we are a movement, but we're also a business, and we're a business made up of people of color who are exceptional, have a world of experience in different areas of not just the cannabis space, but in a lot of those buckets that I mentioned, making up total health and total health equity. So we're really excited to be launching that movement and that business this summer. So you will be hearing a lot more from the CHEM Coalition. And yeah, because that's the direction that we need to go. And the folks in our group felt it was high time that we not only put our money that we are raising where our mouth is, but to demonstrate how it can be done. So more on that to come.
I love that so much. It's funny that you said exceptional so many times, because I was like, that's exactly what I wrote. It was like, first it was what motivated you crazy ladies, but then I changed it to exceptional women. You get both a doctorate and an MBA. I mean, that's incredible. Like, and how did you guys, who or what kind of helped you get through it, inspire you to get through it all?
Well, I'll start, Jess, and you can jump in, because for me, I started out undergrad wanting to major in psychology and in pre-med. And fortunately, I took this really hyped up and like beloved Introduction to African and African American Studies course. Like it was just the thing that all the Black students had to do. And so it was a second semester freshman year course. So like freshmen couldn't take it until second semester. So I was really excited about it. I didn't know what to expect. It just, its reputation preceded. And I woke up. I recognized that everything I had learned about people of color, especially Black people in America, had been a farce, and that I had been denied my history. I had been denied the opportunity to have a collective identity with people who look like me. And so I ended up majoring in African American studies. And I remember having a conversation with my mom after I graduated, and I hadn't yet applied to medical school. Jess and I, or 3 years apart, we applied to medical school at the same time. And I remember telling my mom, I don't want to go to medical school anymore. Like, I want to go get a PhD in African American studies, and I want to start an African American school, because even back then I recognized that, other ethnic minorities have schools. They put their children in German American school or Jewish American school or Chinese American school on the weekend or after school. And these children, even as they're assimilating into the American culture, are still holding on to their heritage, their ethnic identities. They know from where they came, right? And when you know from where you came, you have some idea collectively of the direction you want to continue moving in. And we Black people in America have been wholly deprived that. We continue to be deprived that. So I was going to be this like modern revolutionary and starting this African American school to teach young African American people their heritage. Because I really did believe at that time, I still do actually, that was a root solution to helping us revitalize our own communities from within, right? We need that strong sense of identity and collaboration. Mm-hmm. And my mom was like, no, you're going to medical school. I was so excited. And I was doing my research, looking into programs. And she's like, you're going to medical school. You've done all this work. Like, why wouldn't you? Which is interesting because she told Jess and I both, like, you probably shouldn't go into medicine, like before we had committed to it, because it's different. It's different than what it was. The culture has changed, and you guys, like, there's so much more out there for you. But anyways, she told me, and then Jess, I'll let you take over, that you should do medicine, but you don't have to do it the same way everybody else does. You can do it differently. And when Jess and I started talking about applying to medical schools, we only applied to schools that also had an MBA program, so that at least we could educate ourselves around medicine, to the tune of the ability to be more entrepreneurial as medical doctors.
Yeah, and so I went to medical school right out of college, and in hindsight, I probably wouldn't have done that, but but that's what I did. And I remember not ever wanting to be a doctor as I was growing up, and I didn't have the experience that Rachel had, where my mom or dad told me that I should go to medical school or shouldn't. I don't really recall them being directive either way to go. I was
surprised when I found out.
I wasn't ever interested growing up, but then when I got to college, just sort of through an organic way, I sort of fell in love with psychology, and now I sort of attribute it to lack of creativity. I was like, well, what do I do with a psychology degree? I guess I can become a psychiatrist and go to medical school. And so that's how I sort of ended up going down the medical school road. But yeah, I wanted to do the MBA because I thought it would add some flexibility or functionality to open a clinic or run a hospital system or whatever I might have wanted to do someday. And, I found myself very disappointed and just almost with this like visceral physical feeling of oppression, or like, I don't know. I just had like a physical weight on me as I went through my third and fourth years of medical school, which is those are the years when you start getting into the clinic, right? You start getting into the hospital and the clinic and starting to practice this craft that you've been learning. The disappointment came from the misalignment that we sort of started this conversation with, this misalignment of what I thought I was there to do and what it turned out I was being taught to do. And, you know, I thought I was there to learn how to heal and to make the world a better place and to help people like reach their full capacity and their self-actualization. And what I was there to learn actually was how to be a cog in this medical system and how to make sure that the pharma was being pushed and insurance was being billed because I had coded something appropriately. It was really soul crushing. And so it was that misalignment that eventually drew me to preventive medicine. But I think it was also like having the MBA that I think gave me the confidence, and maybe I don't want to speak for Rachel, but maybe her too, right? It gives us the confidence that, hey, I can do something different. I don't have to be another cog in this wheel of big medicine that I've been trained to be, because I recognize that something here is wrong. I feel oppressed because there's misalignment is physically palpable, and I need to do something else. And for us, obviously, that something else came about in the way of cannabis medicine and then endocannabinology and all the work we're doing now.
Yeah, I love that. That's great.
Important to really talk about how sometimes when you're feeling bad about yourself or you're feeling depressed, it really comes from a place of not getting that purpose and not feeling aligned in that way. And I really love that all of you guys have really chosen to be purpose-driven and aligned, and that's really how you're kind of connecting to source and pushing through and being able to get an MBA plus a doctorate plus all these other things that you guys are doing, because you really can tap into that energy. I feel like the people who have their why sorted are the ones who really are figuring out the big problems that we're dealing with right now. And that's huge for you to actually not necessarily shy away from medicine, even when you were feeling like that initially, but then being able to adjust and figure out what is actually going to work for you. And here you are now with all of your experience, which is amazing. One of the questions, which I think both of you would really give great answers of, like, what are the pros and cons of taking that road less traveled, and how can others kind of learn to feel confident in that pursuit and not feel like, oh, but I'm not doing this or that I'm supposed to be doing. And I know it's kind of a lonely road sometimes. So what does that look like?
Mm-hmm.
It's a really good question. It's sort of tricky to answer. I think, obviously from our perspective, we're licensed medical professionals, and for that profession specifically, taking the road less traveled feels professionally scary in that, we answer to medical boards. And if we don't do as the medical board likes or approves, then literally our livelihood is at risk because they can come after our licenses. We've decided that risk is worth it because the outcome we're trying to achieve is more important than our medical licenses, frankly. Fortunately, nothing negative has happened in the way of our licensing. We, of course, try to operate within the rules, but we also try to push the envelope in the way that those rules allow for the benefit of our patients. But it's also, a matter of us utilizing the assets we do have, right? So yes, we're physicians, we see patients, we take care of them, but we, and especially Rachel, has recognized that the medical license is also an asset that when we go and to the government or we go and show up at committees, that MD carries a lot of weight. And, we have the science to back us up. We have the credentials so that others know that we have the science. When we talk about it, we are a credible source. And so, it's a matter of using those assets in a way that gives us leverage to make the difference we want to make.
That's awesome. I love it. All right, so stepping into your power doesn't happen overnight. Obviously, I literally had a breakdown the other day. And my husband was like, look, this isn't going to happen overnight. I'm like, I just worked so hard. What does it mean to step into your power? And what are some of the milestones that you can attribute to getting to where you are now?
That's a hard question to answer.
I know. I'm like, I don't even know if I've stepped into my power yet to answer that for you.
I think it was a question for your mom to answer.
Right, yeah.
Jess, you and I have had conversations about this. I mean, I'm 3 years older than Jess, and you know, we how many years did we spend apart from one another? 3 between me leaving for college and then joining you in Boston.
Yeah.
Then residency, because we did medical school together, and then medical school to really now, since I live in Oregon and you live in California. So we've had different experiences, you know, by and large. And I've personally, and I'll be vulnerable here, I've personally done a lot of self-examination and self-work in recognizing what Jess described, like recognizing what power and control I had. And my nephew is here. You want to say?
I was trying to catch him.
We just interviewed Zay. You can hang out.
That's our brother who's the oldest of us. That's his 5.5-year-old. I'm sorry.
The one rogue Knox.
Right.
Yeah, so, you know, early on, I was working through what control and what power I had over my destiny, because I was miserable in medical school and in residency. And it wasn't until my last 3 months in residency, after I had started some of this work and really started focusing like more on the integrative principles I was learning and applying that to the clinic. Literally, for example, I would have my 7 or 15 minutes with a patient and use that time to have a conversation, to talk with them about their stress at home. And patients started to tell me things about their home environment or the relationships with their significant other or their children, or, you know, some other extraneous circumstance that was weighing on them, that was causing stress. And we know stress causes inflammation. And in that process, I don't think I renewed a single prescription drug or like up the dose of a single prescription drug for any of those patients that I did that with. They were improving all on their own. Their blood pressure began to lower. Their recollection of their anxiety began to wane. They were improving just through having conversations with me. They would come back every 2 or every 4 weeks, and they were seeing tangible changes. I didn't have to lift a finger. I was just having conversations with them. And that was my big aha moment. And, I recognized that I had to fight for holistic care. I had to fight for spiritual care. And I had to find that place in, whatever practice I created myself moving forward. And lo and behold, this whole cannabis thing just happened. Like I always say, it fell on me and not the other way around. It came to me. And all of those principles fit so beautifully within this paradigm of endocannabinology and cannabinoid medicine and cannabis medicine. So for me, it was, I can't even say it attracted me to it. It just happened. It just appeared. And for me, I also had to recognize that my intuition was right. Like I was moving in such a way that I proved to myself that I had the intuitive and intellectual capacity to own this. And not only to own it, but to teach it and to live it and to preach it and to advocate for it at this level. And yeah, I do think that I have benefited greatly from sticking with it, right, and getting that MD, right? Had I become a PhD in African American Studies, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. So I think it was all providential. I think it, this was meant to be. This, I do feel like I'm walking in my purpose as of this point, and it is exciting. It is scary. It is not conventional. I carry all those worries just described as being a licensed medical doctor in multiple states. But I think a question that was asked very earlier, and I think my mom responded, had the same ethos. Like, you just have to commit. you have to draw your line in the sand and decide, right? That is agency, and we all have the right to it. But in order to do that, I do think you have to sit with yourself. You have to sit with yourself. You have to take inventory of your skills, of your passion, of your desires, and make some sense of it. You got to make sense of it. And, you know, for me, I really, even when I wanted to open up African American school, I wanted to be in service to other people. You know, so this has never been about me. I've never seen it that way. And I continue to not see it that way, right? The ethos of the cannabis health equity movement is to now, instead of weaponizing cannabis, you know, wield it as an asset to achieve equity for all people. We can do this. And, you know, and I say that as a doctor who has to be selfless, right? We've been taught to be selfless and take care of this person, this patient who's trusting us with their lives. So what can I do as a medical doctor to ensure that the systems are serving them? Because I don't have the answers. Not a single medical doctor does. We cannot make you better. We cannot. We need other areas of a society to work with us in collaboration to make these individuals healthy. And as a result, I know this sounds very idealistic, but as a result, we'll create a society that's wholly healthy, right? If we're speaking to the needs of each of us individually, which by and large are all the same. It's just that we have to get past a lot of these like very well entrenched disparities and barriers to access that for a lot of people in this world. It's not, and this is not just an American issue, right? This is a global issue. Like we need to create spaces for people to self-actualize, to take ownership over their own lives, their destiny, you know, how they get to move in this world. And like, to me, it's all one and the same too. But that's how I stepped into who I am. And I'm still learning who I am to this day. Like, this process is not over with. Like, I have no idea what tomorrow is going to bring, but I'm excited about it. And, you know, I believe very firmly that my ideas are not even my own. I believe in the universal library that we all can tap into. But we have to be open, and we have to be in a position to receive that information, that knowledge, and have the audacity to go after it and participate in the process. And, you know, I'm glad that I have a family that I get to do that with. And like even Jess said, I don't even know how to answer. I don't even know if I know yet. You're gonna come with me. You're gonna come right alongside me until you figure that out.
Like your mom right now.
Moving in the right direction. Yeah, we're moving in the right direction. So come on, girl. Until, and that's for everybody. You know, until you find your own lane to thrive in and shine, because it's coming, because you have your part to play too. We all do. Until that happens, join forces behind meaningful work and in alignment with meaningful causes. Like, we'll get there together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is so important that you need to stay positive. Whatever you're choosing is your path, or not positive, passionate about it. You know, it's your passion is what's going to drive you, especially in an industry like cannabis that will just completely demolish you. You know, you have to have that passion and that desire to help lead change and to, you know, help people to keep moving forward. Because if you lose that, then you might as well quit. And that's kind of what my husband said. It was like, do you like what you do? I'm like, I love what I do. I do very important work. The shit we're doing is amazing, but
Yeah.
like Google, you know, it's like, it's hard to have people see, you know? So it's like, as long as you're loving this, just keep doing it, you're getting there, you know? And so I think it is important to make sure, stay passionate about it. And when you're done, that's when you shift or pivot and move on.
Something else will come. Like, it'll be real.
I feel like we're the kind of outliers, though. I think most people aren't passionate about what they do on a day-to-day basis. Most people aren't purpose-driven and trying to go after what their big dreams are. Some people don't even have dreams. This was like a revelation to me. Like, what? You don't have a dream? What do you mean?
My husband actually said, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. I mean, he's in corporate America. But
we're all a product of really the conventional secular education system. Now, yeah, we were taught to critically think in school, but by and large, like, this country is full of doers, not thinkers. And it's not because we're inherently doers. It's because the systems of this world, the systems of this country have they churn us into cogs in the wheel, as Jess put before. Like we as soon as we graduate high school or college, we're really not asked to critically think anymore, right? We're told what to do, and we go along with it because we need income. And by and large, we're acquiescing to the powers that be in that way. We're not becoming, enterprising. Why not? Because by and large, it's easier just to fall in line and become that cog in the wheel, and allow other people and things to, make decisions for you. It's simple, right? But that's the monotony.
But it's not happy.
Yes, and people are not happy. People are so happy. People are so happy. But I don't think people are making.
And they don't know where to point their finger to. Like, what is the cause of it? It's like, well, you're not doing anything that you actually want to do.
Yeah. Like the answer is just do it. It is scary. It is a leap of faith. I'm telling you, the people that have gone and made that leap have lived to tell about it, and by and large, people are happy that they did it.
All right, so wrapping up, how do we empower other women to claim their seat? I know we were just kind of talking about this, but how do we build a bigger table? Obviously we all know, especially with investments, it's like women barely get any of that investment pot. And if we do, it's much smaller percentage of what, the male population is able to receive. So how do we really, I know so many one-women operations. I myself is one of them. I have amazing people like Betsy helping me out, but I'm a one-woman show for what it's, and I know so many that are, but it's like impossible to kind of keep moving when you don't have those deep pockets. How do we keep moving? How do we keep encouraging women to take those jumps?
We need to strategically partner with one another. That's, I think, one solution, but I think it's an important one. We need to support each other, period. We're not competing with one another. We're collaborating with one another, and we need to. We all bring something different to the table. We all have our enterprises that, we're beholden to, but that doesn't mean that we can't share our assets, resources, minds, or energy with one another, such that we're all benefiting from it. I call that the entourage benefit now, instead of that mutual benefit, right? Our collaborative efforts will create something that is bigger than the sum of its parts. That's what we're doing, but we have to believe it. We have to commit to it. We have to raise money together. We have to invest in one another. Like, why are we investing in man-owned companies when there are plenty of women-owned companies that are just as good, if not better, that we can invest in? And I think we have to be overly intentional about it, kind of like investing in communities of color. It's not that we're depriving men and non-people of color of benefit or of investment. It's just that we are going to intentionally and unapologetically invest in women and people of color so that they can survive and have a chance too. So we have to right now. It'll all balance itself out eventually, but that hasn't come into fruition yet because nobody's made that level of intentionality. We haven't reached that yet. We haven't gotten to the tipping point because we have not collaborated in getting there. I would begin with strategic partnering, where it makes sense. And like Jess said, putting money where our mouths are. Like, let's support each other with our dollars, right? There are probably other solutions. Anybody can jump in here. But I think the big ones.
Yeah, I think I don't have a lot to add because I think it is all about community and working together and bringing each other up, because none of us will be able to do it on our own. But you said the word unapologetically, Rach, and I think that's so important, this unapologetic idea, because I think especially as women, this is cliche because it's true, but especially as women, we are taught to be apologetic or to be small or to be quiet. And we cannot afford to do that any longer. We see where that has gotten us, and it's not where we want to be. So we can't be apologetic, right? And we look at our male counterparts, they're certainly not. Sometimes I look at the gall of men and I'm like, I need to have that same gall because they are shameless about using their unfair advantage. So we need to be shameless about using whatever our unfair advantage is too. And we don't have time or room or space to be apologetic about it.
Yeah, our underused assets. Like women, we have so many assets that are underused, underappreciated, that I guess maybe we're too timid to step into our power for whatever reason, but we are powerful. Like, I think we're powerful beyond belief. And I know this is sort of, I don't know, definitely a personal opinion, but my observation, which is that people do not work so hard to suppress another person if they don't find that person a threat in some form or fashion. So I say that to mean that I think the oppression of women and the oppression of people of color have been intentional because of the power these people possess. You know, women, and all women of all colors, but so women and people of color, because there has been effort, there has been investment, money, infrastructure built to continue to suppress and oppress women and people of color, right? That's intentionality. And it's been effective to date because we haven't recognized what has been happening to us this whole time. We need to figure that out and now use our voice and our talents, our skill sets, our knowledge, our intuition, our intelligence to take control of our lives, of our destinies, of the fruits of our labors, so that they're benefiting us. I'm quite frankly tired of being exploited as a woman and a person of color in and outside of the cannabis industry. I should get to benefit from my assets before anybody else does, truly. But that's not how this world works. But because it doesn't mean that we can't right the wrong, that we can't turn that corner. And I think women especially understand that taking care of ourselves is taking care of other people. Like, we're not being selfish when we give ourselves time for ourselves. We take me time. It's so that we can fill up, so that we can pour back out again. And I don't think anybody understands that more, intuitively and intellectually as women do. So that is our power. Can we please harness that and take back what is meant to be controlled by us? I mean, we see it in city after city, state after state, business after business. When you have women in leadership positions, things thrive. And we have to recognize that and start demanding our seats at the table, not just demanding, walking up and sitting down. And taking control over the conversations that inevitably impact our lives, right? We are the spenders in our family, and in many ways, we're becoming the breadwinners in our families. So it's time for us to direct the ship, in my opinion. And we have to do that only after, or we can do that only after we all come together and decide that we're going to do so. So, we need more women's investment groups, women ran and majority women owned venture capital funds. And we just need women in everything. Yeah, but we need to band together. That's it won't happen unless we do. We don't have to compete with one another. That's an illusion. That's what we've been told, right? So that we can take that one seat that men have left for a woman at the table. No, we need at least 60% of those seats, bros.
I love it. Yeah, 100%. Couldn't agree more. This has been a really amazing conversation. Did anybody else have anything to add before we wrap up? I mean, I'll start gushing, but anyway, this has been really amazing. So great to get to connect with you guys personally. I'm beyond excited about this feature. I'm so excited for your photo shoot on Friday. Yes, Friday?
Yeah.
I am so excited. I can't wait to see everything. I really, really appreciate you guys sharing all of your intelligence and your opinions, and so many valid points that we need to really work on with this industry and get things moving. And I'm so grateful that we have you guys to kind of rely on and be able to now, let people know, hey, here's some medical, because people do want to know what medical professionals think about it,
Yeah.
And it's really upsetting that our medical system doesn't have that experience or even know, like just even knowing what you can take CBD with, like if certain medications, like just that alone is so important, So I really, really appreciate you guys for creating everything you've done with these crazy minds you have, making sure that you stuck with it and really being here for us. So I've dreamt about this issue for 2 years now, and it's finally coming to fruition. So really, really thank you so, so much.
Yeah,
Thank you, Jen.
Another round of applause.
We're excited to take part.
This was wonderful. Like perfect questions, because it allowed us to really to think and you know, express ourselves in a way that we don't always get to. You know,
Good.
a lot of interviews are very narrowly focused, and it's like, but there's so much more.
Yeah, we were going crazy, and we of course didn't want to ask the normal questions, so it was like, okay, but yeah, there is so much. So I mean, just thank you so much for going in deep with so many different things, and of course there's just a lot of really important conversations that need to be had everywhere. So I appreciate you guys for starting it. Awesome. All right. Well, have a wonderful day. Thank you very much, Betsy, for being my little co-pilot.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thank you.
Always amazing. And thank you guys for sharing everything. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out. Or if you, I know you guys have met Sue and have hung out with her, Sue Taylor.
Yes, we know Sue well. We love Mama Sue.
She's the best. So I'm on her speed dial, because anytime anything happens with her Instagram, she's like, Betsy, help me. So you guys need help. I'm here for you in whatever way I can support, and thank you for sharing.
All right. Thank you so much, ladies. Have a wonderful and blessed rest of your week. Talk to you soon.
Too.
Bye.
Bye.